So this is my reaction or response to Shane's open letter about RWBY. And I didn't want to include this into my RWBY review because I didn't want to make that video longer than it has to be. And as I said in my review, it didn't really change my opinion on the third season. There is maybe like one thing from his letter that impacted my opinion, but overall, it didn't really change everything. Now, the one thing I've noticed when this letter went live is that people kept taking these harsh sides. Either they were so far off disgusted by Rooster Teeth and was like, oh, we're gonna boycott RWBY now and we're gonna boycott Rooster Teeth, and then there's the other people that are just like that might just kind of side with Rooster Teeth a little too much. And I think both sides are wrong. I mean, they're not wrong in the sense that they're wrong, but they're wrong in the sense, on how they are explaining their thoughts. Because the thing is that when I was reading Shane's letter, there was some of the stuff that Rooster Teeth was doing, be it that a lot of stuff that Rooster Teeth's decisions in this letter were complete ridiculous nonsense, but there were some that just kind of came off as creative differences and stuff that might have needed to be changed. But let's go over the stuff that Rooster Teeth did that I thought was completely disgusting and ridiculous. First off, the way that they treated Monty's wife. I thought that part was just kind of... That to me was the highlight of the entire letter. Everything else just kind of paled in comparison to that because, you know... By the end of reading the letter, I kind of felt that they should have just canceled RWBY altogether. They should have just ended it because... when you are continuing a legacy from a person who created it that's no longer with us, it's kind of hard to maintain it because you're not sure, oh, is this following the the vision that this guy had, or are we just morphing it at that point? And it would have just been better in general for them to either just have to reboot the project completely, or just make another series that's inspired by RWBY. That's it's its own thing, but since we're not continuing RWBY, this is going to be the thing that's gonna do that. So that way, Monty's vision would be preserved in the first two seasons of RWBY. Then just kind of continuing it and just winging what vision he had. And because the thing is that if you're gonna continue the vision, I think they should have just kept Monty's wife on as a consultant or a supervisor. I mean, I think the only thing I could kind of see being a reason why they didn't want her to be a director was because I don't think they wanted to give that role to someone who hasn't worked in the company officially. Now, yeah, you could say, well, she worked with Monty, throughout the whole thing, and she basically earned the right to be a director, and I wouldn't say no to that. I mean, I don't think it would be wrong for her to get a director or to be a director. I don't think that... I'm not saying that it's wrong for her to be a director, but I'm saying, like, I think at some level there might be a business reason why she can't be a director, and that's why I think she should at least be a supervisor or a consultant or someone, or just be still like a person to check in with RWBY instead of just kind of turning their backs on her like Shane kind of mentions. And I think that is kind of shitty, and I think that is the worst part of this letter. Everything else, it's kind of, whatever. But that part I thought was the worst, and I think that is really where Rooster Teeth should be getting the most flack for. Not oh, they wanted a standardized animation department, and that's not really anything that's negative. Now, let's go on to something that Shane said and the other thing I disagreed with Rooster Teeth before I get into Shane is, according to Shane, they wanted to move the animators out of the motion cap studio to a different building altogether. And I kind of disagree. I think that decision to keep the animators in the motion cap studio is better because they get more interaction with their references. Because that's how art works. You need a reference to kind of continue working on stuff. I mean, sometimes some artists don't need references, but references can be useful. And what better way of getting a reference than actually being in a studio that's full of motion figures, So yeah, I feel that not including that in not having that is just kind of weird and puzzling, and I don't really see the logic. I mean, the only thing I could think of would be they wanted to keep the motion cap studio they wanted to expand that, and I could kind of see that, but I don't know. It's just that weird line that Rooster Teeth made. Now let's get into what some of the stuff that Shane said that I kind of disagreed with. Now the one thing that drove me a little insane with this letter is that he keeps saying how unconventional Monty is and how unconventional his methods are and how much Rooster Teeth hated that. And he doesn't really go into his methods all that much. He talks about it sometimes, but it's not enough to be like, oh, that's why. Like, the only thing I could think of is when Shane starts talking about storyboards. And let me tell you about this. This part was just kind of where I thought Shane was just kind of lost me on. Let me try to find it because I have the letter right next to me. So I just want to get the, okay, here we go. So this is what he says. I'm going to read the 2 paragraphs where he talks about it. For the most part, the scene was blank, the scripts, and that is how Monty and I like to work. It always gave us directorial control, choice of camera work, etc. Which you can kind of also do in storyboards. It's not there's no way you can't do that with storyboards, because I've done storyboards. You basically have to put the figures there, you can choose the camera work, you can choose all that kind of stuff, so I don't really see why he's acting as if you can't do that with storyboards. You can. Most of the time people kind of do what Shane is explaining, but they merge it with storyboards, where they, it's, okay. Work, etc. Even though they tried to make a storyboard so the production people could feel better, it was a big waste of time. The thing with storyboards, I don't know what he means by production people could feel better. I don't exactly know what people he's entailing with that, but the whole point of storyboards is to make the animators know what they're doing. So if they're doing in-betweens, or if they're doing things, they could see the scenes that the people want in the storyboard, and then they animate that. They do the in-betweens, they know what to animate. And instead of just kind of going in blank, and that is kind of bad. I've worked on comics on my Facebook and my Tumblr, and I started with not using any storyboards, and it was awful. It is the worst thing you can do if you're creating a story, is not have storyboards, because storyboards outline what you want to discuss and what you want to do with your story, and you can pick and choose things that work and don't work, and you can see how it flows. If you don't use storyboards, you're not gonna really see that flow, and it's gonna waste more of your time than doing storyboards most of the time, because if you're not using storyboards and something doesn't flow, you're gonna have to go through all that work like bit by bit and see what works and what doesn't, which is just more of a roundabout way of editing your work than just looking at storyboards and editing your storyboards then and there, than just having to do the scenes, do the animation, then go back and seeing what works and what doesn't work. Storyboards are very useful. I don't know why Shane acts as if storyboards are a terrible thing on the face of the earth. It's very beneficial, and that would kind of explain why I don't like volumes 1 and 2 a lot, because it wasn't focused. It had so many things that didn't really flow very well, and I think if they used storyboards, it would have been a better 2 seasons. But they don't. But according to Shane, they never used storyboards, which is a terrible decision. So yeah, he says it's a big waste of time, money, and energy, which is complete nonsense. That was the main reason we stayed away from it all those years in the action department. Pre-scripted fights just look scripted. Well, guess what, Shane? Every fight you made in season 1, 2, and 3 are all scripted. Because if they're not scripted, then Ruby should have died a few times back there in the past 2 seasons. Every fight is scripted. Don't tell me, well, it feels scripted. No, every fight feels scripted. I did praise season 3 for having at least to play with expectations, but to some degree, those fights were scripted, because guess what? You have to tell a story. Things have to happen in some way so the story can go on. That's how it is for the 3 seasons of RWBY. I don't understand why he's acting as if, oh, if you don't do storyboards, it doesn't feel scripted. It still feels scripted because you know how this episode will end and you know how the fight is gonna play out, regardless of you storyboarding it or not. So I don't really agree. I don't really see the point of this criticism about storyboards. It just seems silly to kind of talk like storyboards are some big amateurish tool, and it's not. It's actually very useful. A lot of animators that are in made the major leagues now. Let's realize like the artist, the team that made Kill la Kill, Gurren Lagann, Batman the Animated Series, all that use storyboards, and look how good those shows are. But let's go on. Let's get on with reading the rest of this. You avoid him like the plague. You need that organic freedom to be able to go in knowing the characters and their abilities and just let them go at it. You can do that with storyboards. I'm sorry, like, I have the Legend of Korra Book 4 art book, and one of the commentator notes, I think it's from Joaquim Dos Santos. I think he wrote one of the fight scenes with Korra and Kuvira. He was like, oh, this was great. This is my favorite scene to board because I got to let them go at it and I got to express more of a stylistic fighting style and this and that. See, you hear all this like kind of excitement and energy that went into that fight with Kuvira and Korra, and those were done with storyboards because they have to know the scenery and the setting so they can track what's going on. If you don't storyboard anything, nothing is tracked very well, and things have to. It's more work to not storyboard. This is counterproductive what he's arguing. But let's go on. Let's go on to what else he says. They made me sit through the storyboard meeting anyway, and I did it because it was part of the of my agreement for the raise. All I could think was that I was losing time by not making cool stuff right then. Instead, I was made to sit through a very slow-moving debate about each shot, which was forced out with no artistic inspiration. I just wanted to get to it and make it happen. But the thing is with that is I feel that he could have. It doesn't sound like he gave the storyboard meetings a chance, or at least contributed, because he could have. Because the whole point of storyboard meetings is to have a debate about the scene. If you're not going to offer anything, it's going to be a terrible time. But if you take the time and explain, well, the fighting should be like this, and to get into it, involved in it, then it would move better. But if you're just going to sit there and pout about it, then it's going to be slow moving because you're not offering anything to the table. Now, that's not to say that he didn't do anything during those storyboard meetings, but he didn't explain or allude to that he gave any input. I mean, it just made it sound as if he just sat there and he was just twiddling his thumbs. I mean, I know that sounds bad, but it's just I don't get why he's so anti-storyboard when storyboards are so useful in animation. They're the most useful tool in anything you can do. And then he kind of goes. So that's like one of the main points that Shane brings up that I kind of disagreed with. But the other thing that this letter kind of made me think about is that it kind of made Monty sound like a brilliant person that has no flaws. Now, that's not to say that he wasn't talented. I'm not saying that Monty wasn't talented. He was very talented, and he had a good vision. He had a good story. The first 2 seasons, as much as I didn't like them, I could at least see potential within those 2 seasons. And I think that if Monty kept working on it, it probably would have become a better show, for sure. But the thing that I just want to say is that just because he's brilliant doesn't mean that every idea he had was great. Because that's the other thing that kind of came up in my mind when I was reading this letter was that because he kept saying like how Rooster Teeth said no to everything that Monty said. Monty wanted more stuff with Raven, and he wanted Raven at the end of Volume 2, and it was such an uphill fight to get Rooster Teeth to greenlight that, and they kept saying no, and that to me is just saying to me is that Rooster Teeth looked at that and was like, we don't like it. I don't think it's a good idea. It doesn't really flow with how we saw the rest of the season. I don't see a point of adding that. But see, that's a creative difference. it's not. They're not saying no because fuck you, Monty, but they were saying no because they might have disagreed creatively as to why that scene should be there. I mean, the fact that Monty, believed that the scene should be there doesn't mean that it should be there. There's a lot of people who work in the creative industry that had a lot of ideas for their stories that get turned down by other writers, staff members, or whoever because they might have creative differences on that. And yeah, sometimes it is a fight that's worth fighting. It is sometimes, and it pays off, but that doesn't mean that half the time these fights are worth it, or that just because you had to make this fight, it's worth fighting for, or that once you fight and you get the scene in there, doesn't make it a brilliant scene all of a sudden. Because like the way that I saw how Rooster Teeth handled it was that Rooster Teeth just didn't want to introduce a new character at the end of the season. Like they didn't want to just have that there then. Because they probably didn't want Raven at all, and just wanted to introduce her sometime in season 3 or in a season proper, and just not have her be a tail end character. But see, like with Monty wanted to have Raven in Volume 3. That's why he put Raven at the end of Volume 2 so that she could lead into Volume 3. That's fine, but it just Rooster Teeth might not have wanted to go that direction, even though Rooster Teeth kind of went that direction with the end of Volume 3. But still, it's just creative differences. That's all I kind of got out of it, because the things that Shane kind of paints this narrative that Rooster Teeth is just in it for the money and they want to see how they can bank off of Ruby, and that might be true. I mean that wouldn't be surprising if Rooster Teeth was just doing these decisions just to make money. I mean, like, I do agree that it was kind of sleazy to at least be like, well, we should keep acting like we're gonna keep Monty's vision, then not keep his vision by not consulting his wife, not keeping her involved within the project, and just kind of doing all that kind of stuff, and that is sad, and I do feel that is sleazy of Rooster Teeth to go about that, and I do respect Shane for writing this letter. And if I were to go the thing that stood out is, like, sometime in the end, he kind of slammed Rooster Teeth by saying, like, it wasn't an honor working with them. And, he at least knows that he's like, well, he has nothing against the animators or people working on Ruby now, but, they should just know that the company that they're working for doesn't really care about integrity, and they just want to shill a product. And that is kind of true with Rooster Teeth as a whole, because they are a company. They did become the most bloated company in that kind of field. Like, even Mega 64, when you look at Mega 64 to Rooster Teeth, Mega 64 looks so more, like, they look more modest, and they look more genuine with what they're trying to do with their website and their I guess company, if you want to call them a company, but they're a little bit more modest and genuine with their work. While Rooster Teeth, I kind of felt this was gonna happen with Rooster Teeth, even with Red vs. Blue. Like, I used to like Red vs. Blue, and then until they started throwing a very serious plot out of nowhere, I just kind of didn't like that they made Red vs. Blue such a serious show. I don't know, I didn't like that at all, so that was an issue for me. But yeah, that's just how I feel about it. Now, my personal thoughts, now the question would be, can you still like Rooster Teeth? Can you still watch Ruby? Can you still, with knowing what Shane put out? And I think you can, because the thing is that to me, it's like the whole thing with Konami and Kojima, the whole falling out with that. Konami is obviously going to continue making Metal Gear games. I mean, just like how they did with Silent Hill and Castlevania. Now, are you still going to buy Metal Gear games? In my opinion, if they look like they're fun and they look like that they still have an ounce of stealth in there and a decent story, then I might check the new Metal Gear games out without Kojima. But if it looks crappy, if it starts looking like generic games, then I'm probably not gonna bother playing or buying these Metal Gear games, because to me, I have the games that Kojima made. Like, as much as people hated Metal Gear Solid 5, that's still a Kojima game to me, and I still love the Phantom Pain, regardless of the disappointment that game has. I still love that game, but I have those Kojima games. I don't need any more I don't need to worry about the rest because the rest aren't his. So to me, it's like if you're a Monty purist, that sounds like a douchey thing to say, but if you like Monty's work, let's say you like Monty's work, you have the first 2 volumes of RWBY that are his, and you can still enjoy that, and there you go. You have, I think that's why I feel personally that Rooster Teeth should just have canceled the show entirely, because I don't think you would make anyone happy, because that was the one thought that came to my mind when they announced that they're going to continue RWBY, is it going to have Monty's vision? Is it going to still go by Monty's lore, or is it going to be something else? And from Shane's letter, it sounds like they went something else, and it's like that's the risk that happens when you have a story with the creator not there. You just have to wonder, is it going to be the same, or is it going to be different? And so honestly, I feel that the last 2 seasons, 1 and 2, are the last ones. I don't see Volume 3 as a Monty RWBY. I don't see Volume 4 being one. I don't see Onward. I mean, hell, they did RWBY Chibi, and I don't even think Monty would have done a RWBY Chibi series. But yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about the whole thing with RWBY and Monty, is that you can still enjoy it for what it is. If you want to continue watching it, you should feel free. You shouldn't feel guilty or bad. And if you don't want to support RWBY anymore, that's fine too. I just think that this fan base is slowly going to start a divide where they're going to start, maybe not insulting people, but it's going to start affecting people's enjoyment of the show. And it's not the letter itself, but the atmosphere. And I think if people want to genuinely enjoy the show, regardless of his letter or not, regardless of his letter, they should be able to. But it's just, I think if you don't want to support Rooster Teeth or RWBY anymore, that's fine. But I don't think there's anything wrong if anyone wants to continue supporting them, because ultimately you're there for a reason. You still want to support them for a reason. That's your own opinion. That's my general thought. I just think that it was kind of a weird step to continue working on a show without the creator. I think that just naturally opens doors to these kind of issues. And so, yeah, that's my general opinion on Shane's letter. Now there you go. See you in another video.